What's going on, folks? Nadir Tool Dynoworks, and I've been a little bit too busy to do any kind of full-length videos recently, but this 765 Moto 2 that was shipped up to us from California is in such disarray when it comes to proper tuning that I'm going to take the time to actually go ahead and share this with you guys, because if you own one of these bikes, or really any modern fuel-injected motorcycle that has proper ECU flashing software available for it, don't do any of what's been done to this bike. So as you can see, this is a Moto 2 765. We've got all of our tuning equipment hooked up to it, which is why it's pulled apart. Now, the very first time I fired this thing up, it kind of ran and sounded like shit. So I went ahead and got on the dyno, did a few baseline pulls, and here is my final numbers off of just the way the bike has come in with the mapping in place in the Power Commander, which we'll get to in just a second, and you can see how bad it's running. Now, from a horsepower perspective, this isn't awful. It's not good. I mean, I've had these bikes at 138 horsepower to the tire. This one's currently making just under 122. But you can see the air fuel down there at the bottom is like 15% too lean at 6,700, 10% too lean all the way to 9,000, 10% too lean again at 11,000 RPMs. And that is where you end up running into issues and you can actually hurt things. If you're ever going to get detonation in an engine, the most severe detonation you can have is at peak torque at wide open throttle. Well, let's take a look at that dyno graph again and see where peak torque is at wide open throttle and see what the air fuel ratio is. So the two peak torque humps, so to speak, are right at 9,000 and 11,000 RPMs. And lo and behold, it's 10% too lean at 9,000 and 10% too lean at 11,000. So right where the bike is making peak torque, it is just lean enough that it will cause pinging and pre-detonation in certain conditions. Now, a lot of bikes that come on in here are so wildly off from a fueling standpoint that they can't actually hurt themselves. Once you get past lean of peak, say maybe 20 or 30%, you're just not even making enough power to generate enough heat and therefore apply enough actual combustion force down onto the piston while it is still traveling up in its stroke before it hits top dead center to light the thing off prematurely and cause pinging or detonation. Bikes like that aren't at a real risk of damaging themselves, so they just run so poorly it doesn't matter. Bikes like this one, on the other hand, are at a real risk of damaging themselves, because when you're just 10% lean of peak, you're still making plenty of power to cause pinging or detonation, and that's when shit goes wrong. I can't even begin to tell you how many times we've seen just completely obliterated pistons and cylinders here at the shop from bikes that were usually raced on in this type of condition. So the real question is, why is this so far off from a fueling standpoint when it only has a slip-on installed and the stock headers are still in place? And the answer is right here. This is a Dynojet Power Commander 5. And as we've covered countless times in the last decade or more, these do not belong on modern motorcycles that have any sort of proper control available through the stock ECUs. I've actually written an entire article on our website that you're more than welcome to read about the shortfalls of piggyback systems when proper ECU flashing software exists. In this case, not only is the Power Commander a piggyback system that is trying to overwrite fueling controlled by the O2 sensor through most of the closed loop operation of the bike, but the mapping actually in it that will adjust the open loop portion of the mapping in the ECU is fucked. Whoever tuned this bike for this customer simply took the mapping off of Dynojet's website for a 2018 Street Triple 765 with a stock exhaust and a stock air filter. That's not a 2018 Street Triple 765. It's got the same 765 displacement engine from Triumph in it, but the Moto 2 765 engine is radically different than the 765 engine in the Street Triples. And it also very clearly does not have the stock exhaust system in place. So let's take a look at the wide open throttle column on the Power Commander software and see what the fueling changes are in these areas at peak torque. So what I've got highlighted right now is right about 8,000 RPMs, and you can see 9,000 RPMs where that first torque hump is. Gosh, they're pulling out 8, 10, 11% of the fuel. And if we scroll down just a little bit further to the 11,000 RPM 100% throttle column, they're pulling out 10% fuel. So if the Power Commander was never installed, and the bike was just ran as it was with the stock mapping in the ECU, it would have been better off. So I've now zeroed out all the mapping in the Power Commander software, hit 0, and send. So it is no longer doing anything to manipulate fueling on this bike. Now obviously on a full throttle dyno graph, all you're seeing is full throttle. So how is it running everywhere else? And the answer is just as bad, because like I said, the Power Commander mapping was trying to overwrite the ECU that is already being controlled from a fueling standpoint by the stock O2 sensors while they're still enabled. And a lot of people always want to know just how much of the mapping is controlled by the O2 sensors, and you can see it right there. That is the AFR target table, and everywhere that you see 14.5, which is, gosh, almost half of the controlled area, that is what the O2 sensor is constantly trimming while you're riding the bike. And as we've covered before, 14.5 to 1 air fuel is way too lean. That is modern emissions compliance, Euro 4, Euro 5 stuff. So we are going to disable all of that in the ECU, tune it properly, remove the throttle-by-wire restrictions, advance the ignition timing significantly at the top end, actually retard it in a couple places down low, but I'm not going to give you much more detail than that because, well, if you want our tuning in these bikes, you can bring it on over. So now we flashed with our custom mapping, ran through our custom dyno tuning process. Let's show you the final results. With proper tuning now in the ECU, this bike picked up 7 horsepower at the top end. Now you can see the top end gains are not really fueling related whatsoever. The air fuel was 13.1 versus 13.3, so within 2%. Whatever, that's not a big deal. The gains up there are from our custom ignition timing mapping and our custom throttle-by-wire mapping. But downloading through the mid-range, where you can see there at about 6,700 RPMs, we picked up about 4 horsepower, and about 4 foot-pounds of torque, because, yeah, we went from a 14.5 to 1 air fuel to a 13.3. So not only did this guy get 7 more horsepower from proper tuning, but the air-fuel ratio now is massively safer. So you've improved performance and massively improved reliability and engine longevity by getting those combustion temperatures down. And in fact, it made so much more power that with 10,000 miles on the clock, this stock clutch let go on my very last pass. The sort of curly Q you see there at the top end, right about 11,500 RPMs, yeah, that's the clutch slipping and then catching back up with itself. So we'll obviously be recommending this guy replace his clutch as well before he has us ship it back down to California. Now, I take the time to share this stuff with you guys, not to bash on other tuners out there. I've done that enough in the past already, to be honest with you. The reason I share this stuff with you guys is to show you that there are massively better ways to maximize the performance and the reliability and longevity of your bikes. Again, Power Commanders, piggyback fuel controllers, they just don't belong in the modern era. They are a last resort when ECU flashing software is not available for a new model. So if you've got to use them, great. But on stuff like this, when modern ECU flashing software exists, they are at best a waste of money, and at worst, as you saw with this one, actually setting you backwards. So if you guys have any questions about getting your bike properly tuned and dialed in, go ahead and shoot us an email, support@tooldynoworks.com. We are always happy to help.